Hey, everybody. This is HopeNet Studio 2501 podcast coming to you today. Conversations about mental health and wellness. And we're so glad once again that you are joining us, hanging out with us for a little bit. I am your host, Lynn Bright, also known as JLB in the house. And we're really excited today that for today's episode, we're pleased to bring you an episode focused on financial wellness. And because of Stress Awareness Month when we're recording this, so we just want to kind of highlight that. We know how sometimes finances can be stressful. And so that's why we brought our guest in today, and that's what we're going to focus on. So today we're welcoming Jade Smith, CHFC, with Financial Planning Concepts. Hi, Jade.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We also want to thank our presenting sponsor, Hoydell, and also our episode sponsor is Financial Planning Concepts. I just want our audience to know, too, that Jade Smith is a registered representative offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member of FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. So Financial Planning Concepts Incorporated is located at 301 North Main Street, Suite 140, Wichita, Kansas, 67202. So Jade, just want to make sure that everybody knows who you are. And so thanks again for just saying yes to hanging out with us. I think that people need to know that Jade and I reconnected several months ago.
Yes.
Out of just pure divine providence. I think just you thinking you'll never ever see me again or whatever, and then you walk into a place and you hear my voice.
That's correct. No, I've always thought of you, on an often basis because you back in the day you made such an impression on me. But yes, your voice is very distinct, and when I heard it that day, I had to walk around the corner to see if that was you.
And all I heard was Lynn Bright, and from the rest of that it is just history. And so just for us to dive in, because I know that when we were even just talking about doing this, Jade, that it was like, oh my God, we want to make sure that it's just right and that we are a help to our listeners. But it's really a bounce off of even episode 52 and 53, just in case listeners that you want to go and check those out. There's a little bit more conversation between myself and Catherine Lewis from HopeNet that we talked about the 8 dimensions of wellness. And so that is from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So I also contacted Marjorie Roddick. She is a therapist, and she had written an article for goodtherapy.com way back in May of 2016. And she said, yes, please use that. That's not a problem at all. But I just want to kind of just set the stage just to say so that people know how we're defining financial wellness. And then we'll go into, I think you and I have a story. You have a story, I have a story. I think everyone listening has a journey and a story related to money or finances or the stewardship thereof. So I'm going to just kind of launch into that real quick. So financial wellness is a feeling of satisfaction about your current and your future circumstances. Also, finances are a common stressor for all people. And I think about that because, Jade, whether we have a lot or we have just enough or we have very little, that we do all have a relationship with finances. Also, being able to minimize worry about this aspect of one's life can enhance overall wellness. And managing financial wellness includes some of these things. And maybe we'll touch on some of these. We'll try like creating and maintaining a household budget, or we'll get rid of the B word. Is that okay? And we'll call it spending plan so people feel better about that.
That's a good idea. Everybody cringes at the budget.
Okay. You said it. Okay. Starting a savings account and consistently adding to it every month, even if it's just a small amount. I tell people a lot of times, start with like $5 or whatever. It's more about that you're saving versus the amount, especially when you start out. Saving some of one's income for emergencies and retirement, cutting back or limiting unnecessary expenses, avoiding credit card debt. People don't even want to hear my story again, or me and my husband's story. I'm going to bring him into that too, okay? Donating to a meaningful charity, shopping at thrift stores, utilizing the library for free books and entertainment, and cooking one's own meals instead of dining out. If you listen to episode 52 and 53, Catherine and I, we kind of unpack some of that, so you'll get to hear that again. So rather than me going on and on and on, setting the stage for that, I want to know and let you have a chance, Jade, to talk about who in the world is Jade Smith. Whatever you want to tell us about you.
Yeah, that's always such a loaded question when somebody says, okay, tell me about yourself. That's always difficult.
Not a therapy session. You do not get a session right now.
I got to lay on the couch and start talking.
No, you got to pay me.
But no, as we talked earlier when we first met, getting reacquainted, talking about our past and that kind of stuff. So I joined my father in work about 22 years ago, so 2001. So it was an interesting time because when I got my securities license and I was studying for all that, that's when the towers fell. So then the market, collapsed shortly after that. So that's when I got into talking about planning and investments and that kind of stuff. Okay. So it was an interesting time. I guess the upside from that was I got to see what happens when things go the other direction. So people would always say, okay, what do I do if my investments drop? Well, we went through that from 2001, 2002, that kind of a thing. So I got thrown right in. So you started with your dad, like that was the time just to... Correct. So my father started the business in the early 90s, and then I joined him in the early 2000s. So I've grown up around this type of a business. So I was born and raised in Kansas. Family's from here. So I grew up out in southwest Kansas, but Wichita has pretty much been home.
I did not know that you were in southwest Kansas.
Yeah, when I was in grade school, moved out to Dodge City is where I grew up. So.
Well, it's funny to me when people say when Western Kansas starts or whatever. My husband's from Pratt, and he says, yeah, I live in Western Kansas. I'm like, you're only 70 miles from Wichita, but I let him own that. So that's way okay. And I remember we were talking about, it's interesting that you were talking about 9/11 and when the towers fell. I had shared with you that on our debt payoff journey, that for the country, it wasn't a good time, but it really was, it proved to be helpful to us in a weird kind of way because that was a time when several people were offering 0% interest on balance transfers on credit cards, and that was our big deal. We had $65,000 for the credit card debt, and so we were in a process of moving things and making sure that we paid it off in that time. Well, there was a whopping 18 months to pay something off at 0% interest, and so I said that was crazy for our country, but it's interesting what it did to the economy.
That's a great point. I don't even know if those options are still available right now. It'd be interesting to see go check those and say, are those so free? I don't even know. Fortunately, I don't have to look at that anymore. So. Yeah,
I got one in the mail probably about a month ago that had 18 months. I actually ran out and showed it to my husband to say, what is going on in America that we're getting 18 months, 0% interest. But that kind of just reminded me of our journey. You talked about joining your dad, but who first got you interested in or inspired around money, finances? Do you remember that at all?
Oh, I think as a child, my family was very critical in that they showed me ways to do things like that as I was a kid and, mowing yards and that kind of stuff.
The lawn mowing guy.
Exactly. So that was where I was taught how to save money, how to put it in the bank. The funny part, I remember back then, and it's starting to get, lately it's starting getting back to that, but you could put your money in the bank and earn interest. So, you think all the way back in the 80s and you go, okay, I can make 5, 6, 7%.
Right.
And, now we're finally, this last year, rates are starting to come up where you can do that again. But I'm thinking, how long has it been since we could put money in the bank and actually make something? That was not the norm. But that's how I was taught. I was taught, hey, here's a ledger, put money in the savings account. Hey, let's watch it. And they would motivate me by, hey, if you get to a certain level, we'll match you, things like that. So that's kind of how I got exposed to the joys of money and what it could be for you, and how to, hey, I'm going to save up and buy something.
Now, this may be a loaded question here, probably for you and me, so you can always shoot it back at me. But that thing of, what has been your relationship with money, or what is our relationship with money? It's almost like kind of our journey. I should share that thing about, well, I think I told you this. I thought, and I ran my life as if my mother was my savings account.
Oh.
You know what I'm saying? So the thing was, I really didn't have to save, because if I had an emergency, I would just call her.
She's your backup, yes.
Yeah. And so it's that thing of, all of us have a relationship with money, good, bad, or indifferent. But what's kind of been your journey, around that, whatever you want to share about that?
It's money is a fascinating thing. And I think, with HopeNet and the services you offer and mental health and things like that, that's where I think money is very critical, because you always hear the different phrases, whatever, money can't buy you happiness. And then I've also heard the other phrases, hey, I've been broke and I've also had money. I prefer having money, that kind of thing.
Okay.
You hear that kind of thing. But the stress that's there and the anxiety, I know me personally, it's still there, even though I had to dig myself out of bad choices, growing up. That's how you learn about money. Our parents try to teach us. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when your mom says, you better take a coat to the game, and you go, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm going to be fine. It's not going to be cold. I got on long sleeves.
Then, then you go, oh, my mom was right. I should have brought my coat. So money's that way. Our parents taught us, but we may not have really listened. When you buy a home or get credit cards, that's where your journey starts. And then you start to, my father told me a story when he was younger. He went to Sears and had a credit card and bought a suit. Didn't realize he had to pay it back. So he's like, this is great.
It feels good in the moment, doesn't it? Until it's like, oh, by the way, you need to pay us this much.
Yeah. So the anxiety that is created by money is I'm trying to break this cycle, but it's like a two-week cycle. It's like you're trying to get to the next payday, and you're stressed about when stuff comes up, different expenses come out of, you're not prepared for. You go, okay, I had to pay for the furnace to be repaired, that kind of thing. And yes, the money's there. I've budgeted. I've done a good job saving over the last 20 years, but it still throws you it brings that feeling of anxiety and stress. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk to today, is to hopefully help people realize that we all deal with that. Even like you mentioned, people that have money and don't have money, everybody still has the same anxiety. I think when it comes to paying bills and money in general, I think we all think that way.
Yeah, I think about even the people that we get to serve at HopeNet, like where we get those who are under-resourced, those who may have an adequate amount to meet their needs, and then we can have even the people who are resourced or the affluent in the same house. But I was thinking about, and you and I talked about this, that money is finite. For it doesn't matter if you have millions or you have very little. Nobody has an infinite amount of money in the world. It may look like it. Like to me, when I look at the very wealthy, I'm thinking, oh man, that never runs out, but it can. But the thing is, like you even talked about, just that 2-week cycle. Like waiting for the living paycheck to paycheck. I have actually done some spending plan creation with people where I had to say, it's not writing down all the numbers and you have enough money to reach this. It's like, let's write out what you pay this week and what do you pay next week. And I just want to encourage people that may be where we have to start, to just say, I have this amount of money and I have this much expenses and I don't know when to pay what when and if I'm going to ever have enough. But just offering hope that a lot of times, Jade, I think our biggest mistake is that we fail to look at what's true. We'll just kind of like, I kind of know what I have. I get paid this and and it's okay if I eat out right now, but then when you really sit down and say, I'm spending this much money on entertainment and eating out,
Yeah, that's a very good point. When you see that and you go, wow, I didn't realize. And part of the stress that comes in my world is that you save money and you have a savings account. We talked about that. It's kind of like the first thing you should do is really work on trying to have $100, $200, whatever, 2,000. But
that thing that stressed you out.
Exactly. So, but the other key thing that I work really hard at is that, hey, okay, I've got money in the savings to back me up, but it's really critical to, just like you're talking about that spending plan, it's really critical to live and have your bills paid by what you're making versus always paying, if you're pulling from your savings account all the time.
And not adding to it.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. So and that's where my anxiety comes from. It's like, okay, no. I put that money aside, but I don't want to have to keep tapping that. I want to make sure that we're living within our means, because it's in the world we live in today. It's really easy. Every subscription, it's Netflix and Disney Plus, and next thing you know, everything gets out of control. And you go, where did all this come from? This wasn't in our spending plan. Now we have. Hey, we signed up for that free 7-day trial, forgot to turn it off. Now we got another subscription, and so you start to add to that. And, shopping in particular, that's the joke about Target. You go to buy 3 things and you leave with $200 you bought.
In one bag. Exactly. And then you're mad when you get in the car. I got $200 worth of stuff in one bag.
There you go. This is it.
There was that thing that you said, like, there's that encouragement to save $1,000 so that you have an emergency fund. And you had mentioned to me, you said that about freaks me out. Like, that just seems so overwhelming.
Yeah. So this is where I think that a lot of people in my position as a financial advisor are way off base. We talked about this, and you thought, I thought it was interesting, your response. I said, I find the 6 months living expenses.
Oh, yeah.
And you acted like, well, that's what you do. And I thought, well, if someone's struggling to pay bills and I say to them, you need to have 6 months worth of living expenses and savings, they look at me like, well, what? I'm trying to pay my electric bill next week, that kind of thing. So
somebody's passing out right now listening to us.
Exactly. And to be quite honest, in my world, people like me don't want to deal with that. Who am I dealing with? I'm dealing with people that are already investing. I'm not sitting down trying to get people to pay their electric bill. I'm not. But that's part of the conversation that we have to teach people. That I had a guy call me the other day, and he was looking for a hardship out of his retirement account. He said, I'm not paying my bills. My credit cards are out of control. He goes, I got a dental procedure coming up. He said, my income has dropped in half. And the only answer I had for him was, you might want to switch jobs. I was like,
make a change, a transition.
Yeah, I'm thinking this is going so bad. I'm not sure what I can say to you. I felt helpless, to be quite honest. Here's a person struggling, and they're coming to me, and I'm like, well, if you're not paying your bills, I'm not sure. That's where we need to start right there.
Yeah.
How do you talk about saving money when you're not paying your bills?
Yeah, and I think that where we land, Jade, is even telling people, even when they hear about the 6-month thing, is just start a little bit at a time. Just because the thing is, the way it was shared with my husband and myself was, you want a cushion so that it breaks the cycle of debt. So if you could just gradually save up to $1,000 an emergency fund, and then it then can address when you need new tires or whatever. So you don't have to charge them. You would go to that fund, because then you've established, I'm going to put that back because it's in my spending plan. Saving is in the spending plan. It's not whatever's extra. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you think about like what you just explained there. I don't know if you can remember that first experience. We talked a little bit about that first experience I had where I went through a Christmas. I had the money saved. I used that for Christmas gifts. Didn't use credit cards and had the savings.
You didn't use credit cards for Christmas?
Yeah, exactly.
Those two C's go together.
Exactly.
Credit and Christmas.
Well, and that's part of the American way. We overspend for Christmas, so that's hard to break that cycle too. You feel guilty for not getting the lavish gifts, but you have the spending plan, you have the budget, the back to your tires and that kind of stuff. That's the other empowering feeling when you say, okay, I got $50, $100, $200, and then something like that comes up, and you go, it can kind of, take the wind out of your sails when you have to take that money out of savings because you built it up. But then you also have to say to yourself, I have the money. I'm glad I saved this. That emergency is not going to totally derail what I'm planning. So that's, to me, the empowering feeling of saying, okay, I'm taking control. I'm now, that was the feeling that always got me when I think it was 15 years ago when I really started adjusting my life. That was the feeling I did not like, the out of control feeling of money, where you were just. It was commanding you, exactly, ruling you. You're just following along. And you're saying, okay, what's going to happen next? And then when you stop the credit card spending and start focus on the savings account, getting that built back up. And I had lunch with a friend yesterday, and he's really good at. He takes money out of his paycheck. He has it set up where he gets paid and it goes into a savings account every payday. So that's how he budgets. He was talking about, okay, if we want to, take a little trip this weekend, I've saved the money specifically for that kind of stuff. And that's where those little tricks like you were talking about. And
it removes the anxiety. The word that keeps coming to me, which I didn't have, and I hear that you didn't have either, is this freedom that we didn't know was there.
Yes.
To help free us. And the freedom equals peace of mind, I think, maybe, where before something else was telling us. And sometimes, Jade, it was because we just didn't know. It wasn't that we were just trying to do something on purpose to make our money go out of control. It wasn't that at all. So I think the peace, freedom is what kind of comes.
Yeah, and you're much better communicating this than I am. You always talked about, okay, we have everything in the plan, and that's where the other thing is that a lot of stuff. Okay, when you get out of control, it is simple things. You go, okay, we bought dinner. Did gas, whatever, just everyday things.
Right.
You're next thing you know, you're putting those on credit cards and you're not tracking it. And then the bill comes and you go, wow, that's twice what I thought we put on there, that kind of thing. And so you really talked about if it's in the spending plan, we know what we're doing.
Right. A zero budget, like every dollar is assigned kind of thing. And I did get on you a little bit, Jade, so I'm going to call you out on the show right now. I said, now, okay, I think you're a saver. And I said...
my wife would have loved that. She would have been like... Yes.
Because I really believe in relationships, especially husbands and wives. Just hear me on this. I do believe that there needs to be a saver, and there also needs to be a spender, within, limits. Because the thing is, if you both are savers and you're just and especially stress around that, then it means that you begin to hoard money.
Yeah.
Okay. Versus on the other side, if both of you are spenders, you're just like, we're just all out here. We're partners in crime. We're doing this. And then you don't have anything saved for emergencies and that kind of thing. We're both, doing this over here. But I love it how there can be some balance so that the spender helps the saver have fun. And then the saver helps the spender know that we need to plan for the future kind of thing.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Yes. I hope we captured that right there.
I thought that was great because that has been one of my weaknesses or turnoffs to a certain degree for a relationship is that if you're so constricting, we talked about, okay, the lattes and Starbucks and that kind of stuff. That's always it's.
And there's nothing bad about those things.
No, it's a running joke within the financial world. Oh, you make your coffee at home and you'll be a millionaire. That kind of thing. Which that's always. It's like no, that should not keep you from saving money. Yes, you don't want to go 10 times a day to Starbucks because
you don't.
If you have that kind of money, I'm impressed. If you can go to Starbucks that many times, but yes. To your point, you go, okay, yeah, you want to save, but you also don't want to cut off life in general and enjoyment that is
exactly.
There. So
there it is.
It is a balancing act. And so, yes, I've really worked hard in my own personality because my first inclination is to take that money, stick it aside, and versus, okay, There can be a happy medium. You need to do things that still bring you enjoyment. You still have to enjoy life without overspending, but you can't just save every dime. Yes.
And not just like operating like in fear too.
Yeah, no, that's another, speaking of anxiety, anxiety will fester itself into physical feelings. When you have stress, your body feels something. It's kind of like when, nowadays we used to always answer our door growing up. Now when the doorbell rings, sometimes that creates a little stress, like, what is that? And the anxiety, spending money does that to me to a certain degree. So I've really had to, work on, okay, relax. This is part of the plan. Yes, it feels uncomfortable. When you're writing a large check for something, or buying something, even though you plan for it, it's still, to me personally, it still creates that stress to me. Going, okay, $3,000 for carpet, or $1,000 for tires. I mean, that's
But someone is really enjoying that they're hearing from you right now, saying that you're being vulnerable enough to say that I do get a little anxious about that because you're not the only one in the world that has felt that. And I know that we think about too, when we think about current day, some of the things we're experiencing today we probably never dreamt of when we were teenagers or even in our 20s or in college. But there's a lot of stress around for individuals, for couples, and for families. And we even were thinking about just the thought of it, just the topic of just talking about money, whether you have a little or enough or much, that brings some anxiety. I did also encourage, when we're talking about the spending plan, especially for married couples, that the encouragement is just that there's one bookkeeper. There's a bookkeeper, because sometimes people, I want to do this together. We got to do this together, and we're partners in crime to get our financial house in order. But the thing is, I share with lots of people that the bookkeeper usually has the interest, the time, the skill to be able to do that. And the other person may be the one that says, okay, you take care of that. I don't want any part of that. So I am like, I don't want to call myself a control freak, but I do like to know what's going on. So I am the bookkeeper, but the bookkeeper is not the boss. The bookkeeper is the one that then implements, sees the spending plan through that you decided on together. So you know what I'm saying? So it's not like it's my plan. It's like it's something we came up with together.
Yeah, and this is what I love about life is everybody teaches you something, and through our conversations, I've learned there's a lot of stuff I need to learn. And
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that the one phrase I said one time is I said I, and you said we.
Yeah.
You corrected me multiple times. We, and I was like, yeah. So to your point right there, you have the bookkeeper, and yeah, you're right. It's like, okay, I'm not dictating this. I'm not the dictator.
We've already decided.
Exactly. And I remember I asked you a question, and you said, well, no, we've agreed. I'm not telling my husband this is what we're going to do. No, we sat down, agreed, and we both follow it. And I thought that was impressive, because the communication that's there, and that's back to my anxiety and stress. It's like, okay, let go. Communicate, it's like communicate. Because see, the other stress that I get from money is that the times that I let go seems to unravel. So it's kind of like if you're watching it and you're on it, and then you try to be a little more carefree, then all of a sudden you go, whoa, it's starting to go, starting to unravel. And so that's something I'm working on to be better. And that's where I thought what you were saying was the communication. So if you communicate together and you have the plan together, there is no stress of this is what I want and this is what she wants or he wants. It's like, no, this is what we want. And I thought that was great, because it's the communication and the plan together.
And there's some single people listening to us right now too that say, well, what if I don't have some money to do it? You still build your spending plan, but I say somebody that you trust, somebody that you feel comfortable about, you may not have to disclose all of the details about, but say, hold me accountable on just eating out, no more than 3 times a month or something like that. And that person could do that for you, but somebody can, be your accountability person.
I think that's huge. That's why people that work out with someone else have so much more success. Because I had a guy I used to run with, and he drove me crazy because he never said no. I would say, "Hey, you want to go?" Yeah. I was like, oh. It was like, 6:30 in the morning. Hey, you want? Yeah. I'm like, why doesn't he ever say no? I'm like, I don't want to run. But that's where the other thing I thought about is that the communication that we do now versus what we used to do. Back to mental health and stress and depression and anxiety. It's so much more prevalent in the communication world now.
Okay. We're talking about it. Yeah. And people, the stigma is, dropping away, and people are reaching out, getting help.
So back to your point on the accountability, I think that's where money is too. I was fortunate that I had parents that talked about money and showed me different things and said, okay, let's go to the bank, get a savings account. But I think nowadays, I hope that people are making progress to talk about these things. I know I've learned, from my wife and kids that the communication is
key.
Yeah, it's not what I used to do. You didn't talk about depression or anxiety or stress. It just hey, let's go. Let's prop yourself up, and it wasn't that stringent, but it was not a regular conversation. So I think to that point, money. I hope that money is becoming more of a conversation.
Especially with kids. And this is like growing up, I didn't know how much money my parents made, but I thought we were rich. I did. I'm just going to be honest. I thought we were rich because when we all turned 14, we all got cars.
Yeah. Me
and my siblings. If I asked my mom for money or my dad, we got the money. So you thought, okay. And that phrase that they sometimes kids think that money grows on trees. Well, I didn't think that, but I thought, okay, I don't have to think about that very much. But I do want to encourage parents that if they could start out early, if this is possible, because children, they do have access to money, whether that's through gifts, grandparents, birthdays, Christmas, all of that. And I would really encourage a third. So if children can begin to give a third, save a third, and spend a third, and be encouraged to do that, just imagine when they're 50, what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a huge lesson. I think that, that's always, my wife and I always talk about that, we want to have that money to be able to donate, whether it's, hey, the university or the church or, that kind of thing. That's where money is empowering when you get to the point where you go, okay, I can do something else to help someone else. And if you teach your kids that, I think, and that's where, back to the simple lesson I got of, I had a ledger, and it was exciting to see that money build up, the money that I built up from mowing
yards.
You're
really dating yourself on that
exactly.
ledger. I just
it wasn't on my
it.
It wasn't on my app. It was.
I know. I saw that just now. I was like, oh, that was a thing.
Well, speaking of ledgers, my son said that to me a few months ago. We went somewhere and did something, so I get the checkbook, got out and write it down, and he says, "Why are you writing that down?" And I thought that was great. I said, I paused and I was like, that's a pretty good point, because I can look at it on my phone any minute of the day, what's in my account. And I thought, that's a pretty good point. If it's,
but it's a generational thing. So I think that's cool.
It's just habits, and I've even had to teach my own father. I'm like, hey, let's get online and pay your bills. You don't need to get that stamp and send.
And he's kind of like, but I like it. I want to.
He's like, well, I'm waiting for the check to clear. I'm like, you're doing what?
This is really funny. And I'm not calling out my bank at all, but my husband and I went through the drive-through, and then all of a sudden the teller who we're familiar with says, do you guys, that you can scan the deposits, and just send it through, and it will just, post and all of that. And there's an app. Do you have the app? I'm like, I'm at the drive-through window. I love coming through the drive-through window. I love seeing you. I hope you love seeing me. And now you're trying to send me to an app. Okay?
You're trying to make me go away.
But it was a generational thing, you know what I'm saying? And my husband and I, even when we drove away from the window, I'm like, I still want to come here, and I still want to see this person. And there's an app. But it's not, neither one is good or bad. It's neutral, okay? And he was just trying to help us. I said, I just want to save you time and, and gas and all of that. I'm like, we like driving over here.
You said I can get my sucker when I come through the drive-thru.
Exactly. But that thing too, just piggy banks, loose change, tapping into cash back opportunities are all those ways that, whether it's children or grown-ups can tap in that. Go ahead.
Yeah, back to what, like we were talking about, simple, okay. People say, okay, how do I reduce my anxiety? How do I get these things started? We talked about, okay, if you have the ability through work, if they will set up multiple accounts, put money in there, that's an easy way. That's kind of a piggy bank style saying, okay, get it into my savings before it hits my checking account. The other thing you talked about, and yeah, that's one thing I've used, loose change. Now, back to the new world, I don't know how many people are using cash. My father is one of the last. He's 80 years old, and he still goes into the gas station to pay cash at the
Don't be calling out your daddy on the podcast.
Exactly, but my son, they're not using cash. But if you have loose change, yes, save that stuff. That's one thing I did. That's how I partially funded college accounts, was the loose change. And okay, I got through the year I got another $100 worth of change that I take to the bank, and then I put it in the kids' college account.
Okay, that's good.
Things like that, little pieces here and there. The cash back on the credit cards, the only one we use is that it's through Amazon. So it's basically, Amazon's so convenient. I was like, well, why fight it? We're all using Amazon anyway, so let's use the Amazon card. So all the purchases on Amazon, you get cash back using the Amazon card. You just have to be really careful to make sure you get that card paid off every month.
Every month. And that's something that is new, because people are pay the minimum payment, and that probably was our problem. We were paying the minimum on everything, but our debt load was so heavy. But when you say we are now going to begin paying that off, you really start paying attention to those swipes. How much you're going to swipe the card.
Yeah,
and what you're buying, and is it part of the spending plan? Am I swiping for things that are in the spending plan? Yeah,
and that's where exactly. If you don't have good communication, so let's say one person doesn't really necessarily like the spending plan, and then they're I'm going to use this card, and hopefully they don't find out, that kind of thing, and it can really snowball, and that's where it gets out of control, and that's the thing that I've loosened up a little bit over the last few years, but I probably went, when I really took control of money, I went 6 years, probably 7 years without a credit card. I used my debit card from the bank, but I got rid of all that.
Wow.
So, because I realized that it was so difficult. It was hard to control when you're trying to pay it and still charging on it. Like you said, you go, okay, this isn't going down, or it's going down too slow. So that's where I said, okay, no more credit cards. I'm not doing that anymore. So that's how I took control.
And Jade, you and I are sitting here talking like this, being pretty peaceful about it, because if we would have done this podcast 30 years ago or whatever, we wouldn't be as joyful. maybe you're not as old as I am, but you know what I'm saying? We would, but the thing is, we want our listeners to know that there has been a journey, there has been some pain, but there is hope on the other side when we just kind of say, let's take a look at this and let's make some changes, let's make some adjustments. And that, money can be our friend. It can do a lot of things for us, but we get to tell it what to do, not it telling us what to do. And I want to make sure that we get some stuff in here, because we had talked about financial signposts for health or chronic stress, like some things, financial signposts. And I think, what are some signposts that you see, that you recognize, some financial signposts for health or chronic stress, such as, one thing that I see is right now when we're recording this is that the gas prices are going up again. They had come down, they're going back up, like, oh, there's a signpost to me that I may have to tweak my budget a little bit, because there may be $10 to $20 more a month that I need to make sure that's in the spending plan for that, rather than to just say, okay, we got it, it's no big deal, it doesn't affect us, because it does.
Yeah, definitely affects you. I mean, gasoline and groceries and that kind of stuff. I know we adjusted, with everything, the inflation that really hit over the last couple of years. Yeah, you start to decide what is important to buy. You go, okay, we got to switch this or that.
Or are we going to eat eggs anymore?
Yeah. Well, one of the big things in our household is cereal. Everybody loves cereal. And so, the one thing I noticed was all the generics disappeared.
Wow.
And then the boxes got, the prices went up, then the boxes got bigger, and I just thought it was interesting trying to buy cereal. It became pretty pricey. Same with eggs, same thing. And you start to, hey, let's eat a lot more pasta, and, pasta is cheap, and spaghetti sauce and that kind of stuff. But gas is the same way, and that's always the argument with a lot of people is, okay, Costco or Sam's, that kind of thing, because I know Sam's is typically about 20, 30 cents a gallon cheaper. Not everybody has a membership.
Right.
The other argument I've always, go to Costco. Well, I don't have a Costco membership, and it's not by where I live, so I'm not going to make a special trip all the way to Costco just to buy gas. But you're right. This financial signpost that I experienced, you were talking about as our journey has gone. Yes, early on before you've done much, you're not paying much attention, and you're not having these gotcha moments. But buying cars and things like that, I think, is a huge financial signpost because we're so conditioned. I mean, if you look at the ads for cars, they're all about the payment.
Okay, yeah.
And that's, you're not, 72 months, 84 months, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people don't really look at, they go, I can afford that payment, but they're not thinking about the long-term purchase.
7 or 8 year car payment or whatever, 3
years into it and you're not happy anymore, well, you're pretty much stuck. I mean, the value of the vehicle is below what you owe. So that becomes a reoccurring cycle where, you're trading in a vehicle and carrying more debt to the next one, and it's going to be forever to pay that off. So that's like a credit card that won't go away, that kind of a thing. So, but yeah, groceries and things like that, you really have to. What I do is a real simple trick. I open up the Dillon's app before I go, and I start clicking on all those coupons because it's nice and easy. Where you scan the item and you get the coupon. Versus, I never have been one of those people. I'm not going in with a bunch of coupons that I don't have the patience for that, and I'm not going to take that time. But the app is real handy. I'm like, boom, 5 minutes, and I got it on there. And
look at you! Now you're trying to act like your son. Like you're like, here's an app. He's gotten you convinced somehow, some way.
You were thinking I was going to have the card folder with all the coupons in there.
Yeah. I want to see you doing it. And whenever you see that, you say, that man's wife sent him in here to buy groceries today.
That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the check. I line with all my coupons. I'm going to say, wait a second, I'm going to write a check. So everybody's going to be standing behind me like, oh, come on.
Okay. We got to get ready to try to bring this home a little bit. But I do want us to answer one question, then we'll give some tips and stuff. But why do some of us humans believe that financial literacy is so hard, or even thinking about the future is not even something that is on our radar financially, I guess?
Oh, I think,
or some myths about that.
Well, first of all, as far as the financial literacy, I think a lot of us are out of sight, out of mind. We don't really want to think about it because it is difficult getting started on anything. Anytime you think about school, the hardest part of writing a paper was starting. Once you got started,
it flowed.
Yeah, you're
kinda.
Like, sort of. But you know how that dread was there prior to, and that's I think with financial literacy and planning. You mentioned myths, and this is where I deal with a lot. People go, well, I can't do anything. I don't have a lot of money. And I go, no, you don't need a lot of money to invest. You can start with $50 a month. And everybody's like, what? I can do it for $50? Yeah, keep going. So that's one of the myths.
That's good to know.
The other myth about it, about saving money or investing is, it's very complex. No, it's not. It's straightforward. You get something set up, just set up a plan, a basic plan, make it part of your spending plan. That's where I try to tell a lot of people is that, like you mentioned, you go, okay, I got a zero budget, meaning that everything's accounted for.
Every dollar's assigned.
Yeah. Well, your college account for your kids or your retirement account, your IRA, that kind of stuff, that should be in your plan. It's part of it. And that's where, the months that I will, sometimes you go, okay, we're getting really tight on money. It's because I'm not going to change that. I'm not going to back off. I'm going to say, hey, we're not going to go buy that because we had this for each kid's college account. We got this for the Roth IRA. We got this for our joint saving. We have a joint mutual fund account that we use that. Yeah, and then every year I try to increase that. So yes, that's part of the plan. I don't change.
I'm laughing at you, Jade, because this is so part of what you do. And so the thing is, people listening may be like, yeah, those things are going to be really important. And I think you can see the power of it too. Yeah. And you're at a spot too right now where I can contribute to that.
True.
So there may be times when people would say, well, I have this really big emergency and I don't have enough money over in savings to address it. Maybe I do cut back on how much I put in the, you guys that can't see Jade, his head just kind of cocked to the side a little bit.
No,
but you know what I'm saying?
I think that's a fair statement. Yes. I too have done that, as far as when things.
Instead of 100, maybe it's a 50.
Exactly.
So that I can just free up some cash.
All right. So I'll be 100% transparent here. Yes.
Okay.
My plan is to increase every one of those every year.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't always happen that way. It may go the other direction.
But at least you have a plan and you have a goal.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I try not to stop. That's the only difference, is meaning that if $50 is a minimum, I'm going to make sure I at least do the 50. And then once I'm going up to 100, 150, whatever the amount is. Yeah. And don't, you have to be flexible enough. Back to the latte example, you say, okay, you can't be so restrictive that
you said the word flexible? Jay Smith?
I know.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Your head cocked. Yeah. You're like looking at me like, because I made comments and you're like, what? So yes, that is part of my journey and part of my growth is to learn to be more flexible. And that's where, even in our brief meetings, you've taught me, and I'm like, oh yes, I need to change my language, the way I phrase something, the way I communicate. It can, because when you say something like I do this, and you're like, okay, you say, well, that's kind of a put off because
it's a we thing, especially if you're married and that we're in this thing together, and whether that person is at home taking care of the home and there's another breadwinner, or if both of them are contributing to the household, it's still a we. It's not whoever's bringing the money kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's
that's a therapy session.
Yeah,
okay.
And that's where my wife has taught me a lot, because she's more open than me to talk about these things, even though I do it for a living. So she brings it up more than me because, I guess I just do these things and I think about them, but then I don't know if other people think the same way. So you don't want to put your beliefs on everyone. And that's where I thought about prior to us talking. I said, well, I want to make sure that hopefully someone watching this isn't put off by, well, I can't do those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
we want to encourage that they can.
Yeah. And that's where, back to the grace, give yourself some grace and say, okay, it's like that picture you always see about, hey, here's my idea of my plan.
Yeah.
And then the reality is, it's like a big jumbled mess. And yes, when I look from high school till now, what I thought my plan would be doesn't exist, meaning that things have changed and I've had new plans and you adjust. And that's where money comes in, is that all the lessons I've learned by my poor choices, that's where I've grown. And I guess if I would have been really critical of myself, I would have just said, I can't do this, I'm awful. But no, I learned that, geez, that was really dumb. But
you gave yourself some grace.
Yeah, because I've made some really bad choices.
Yeah, and the thing that I want us to remember, and just as people are listening to us, is that the journey's not over. Is that we are still engaging with society. I mean, money is changing all the time, even in our day, in our generation, and we're at a different phase than we were when we started the journey with money. So just want people to not look at Jade or Lynn and say they have it all together, because we don't. No. And I'm just going to end with some key helpful tools and some points that. It's kind of like what Jade said, that thing, control what you can control, what can be controlled. Look at the truth, like what's the truth of your circumstances, then build your spending plan from that. And some people are like, I don't even know where to get started. Call us at HopeNet, ask for Lynn, or even Consumer Credit Counseling Services. They are phenomenal here in Wichita, Kansas. So I know that there's an entity anywhere across the country that deals with consumer credit. Just communication. You brought that up. That's really key. Automatic withdrawals, having it come out of your paycheck. employee matches, the envelope system. We do have a friend that said, that triggers me a little bit because it makes me begin counting. So that may not work for everybody. And for us, we don't envelope everything, but like clothing and maybe entertainment we do, but not everything has an envelope. And then the biggest thing that you reminded me of, Jade, was to celebrate along the way. Like making sure that, when you have the wins, that you're celebrating along the way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Here's a simple trick that I do just to mentally make myself feel better every day. Mm-hmm. Whether it's, people don't do this much, balance checkbook or whatever, call bank or, I make a checklist, and even simple little things like that, I go, perfect, I did it, so that way, because sometimes, you just feel like I can't even do the basic thing. One thing I did miss is that not everybody has this option, but if you have an option through retirement, through work, that's the first step right there to get started, because especially if they have a match, you're going to get, you sign up, it comes out of your paycheck. There it is, part of your plan. You don't have to have it come out of your checkbook. They're going to match you. That's the first thing I always tell everybody. If you have a retirement plan at work, sign up and get going. Up for it. That was what I said to my friend yesterday at lunch. He still hasn't signed up, and I harp on him all the time.
But still be his friend, because he may listen to you one day.
Exactly.
Jade, thank you so much for just pouring out your heart and being vulnerable and being willing to even do this, and even for you all to even sponsor this episode. And I just want our listeners just to remember that Jade Smith is a registered representative offering securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisory Networks, member of FINRA, SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. And Financial Planning Concepts is located, here we go, 301 North Main Street, Suite 140, Wichita, Kansas, 67202.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Bless you. And bless our listeners. And we hope and pray that you heard something today that will be helpful on your journey to financial wellness and to reduce your stress.
Thanks for listening to Studio 2501, conversations about mental health and wellness. Studio 2501 is hosted by Lynn Bright. Lynn is HopeNet's Director of Community Impact, a published author, and has been a licensed clinical therapist for over 20 years. This podcast is owned and operated by HopeNet in Wichita, Kansas. HopeNet is a faith-based nonprofit providing a wide range of mental health and wellness services, including counseling, life coaching, and trainings. For more information on HopeNet and to learn how you can help expand our mission, visit hopenetwichita.org and follow us on social media at HopeNet Wichita. Thank you.